Oh, hello. Morning, everyone.
Hi.
The Lord reigns, the tech worked. My name is Jo Frost. I am the recently appointed Exec Director at OCCA, the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics. And we exist because we believe that everybody must discover for themselves the goodness, the truth, and the beauty of the gospel of Jesus.
Right.
So it seems very fitting that I should be here this morning sharing with you all with today's theme. We exist to help wherever we can. And so a little bit naughtily, this is an opportunity for me to share some stories with you guys, but also for me to be in the room and go, actually, how can OCCA help with this conversation about what does it look like for us to seek the goodness, the peace, the prosperity of the city of Oxford, but also what does it look like for us in all circumstances and all situations to proclaim the good news of Jesus, and on occasion, if necessary, we get to use words. So how can OCCA be a part of that is basically the theme. Now, to get us started on our theme today, I want to look at some research that I was responsible for commissioning when I was at the Evangelical Alliance. I only started at OCCA in February, so my main brain is still dual processing at the moment. And actually, as Andy was just sharing, one of the saddest things about the Quiet Revival's data being pulled because it was unreliable was because actually it had done so much to confirm what many of us were seeing anecdotally or hearing about in our churches. This week I was chatting to a church leader who's based in Birmingham, and he was telling me that next week he's baptising 15 new believers into their church, and they do that every term. And he just goes, that's never been our story. But every term we're seeing 15 people get baptised. It's amazing. Last week I bumped into the producer of A Diary of a CEO. I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast. Stephen Bartlett does the third biggest podcast in the world on Spotify. And OCCA's president, John Lennox, was on it a couple of weeks ago. It was great. I got the selfie, very happy. But I bumped into the producer and we were just chatting about how they do their testing. So before the episode comes out on a Thursday, on the Monday and the Tuesday, they test with their audiences which keywords, thumbnails and titles are going to be the most successful. And they had assumed in the creation and the commissioning of the episode that the audience would be most interested on the AI and tech side of the conversation, specifically around tech anxiety. The key words that were absolutely at the top and blew all of the tech stuff out of the water was Christian apologist.
Wow.
I mean, I had to translate my title to people all over the place, and yet on YouTube, and this was before the church had got hold of it, this was before we started sharing it, this was in testing, the most engaged audience for people searching for Christian apologists. Is the Bible true? Is God real? All of those questions were what people were most interested in. The Quiet Revival's data might be unreliable, but something is happening. So, a couple of years ago, I was chatting with a colleague of mine and we were having one of those funny conversations, and we were asking each other, is it possible for the church to be in revival? And by the end of the conversation, we said, it is possible for the church to be in revival. It's also possible for the church not to be aware that we're in revival, and we just wonder a little bit if we might be seeing the first fruits of it. So off the back of that, we decided to do some research. And we wanted to know who was coming to faith in adulthood, what was starting their journey to faith, what helped them on their journey to Jesus, and what happened afterwards. We wanted to get about 100 stories. We ended up getting just under 300 stories from people all around the UK, all sharing what had happened to them to come to faith as an adult. Because we're quite good at capturing the stories of young people, but we're not that good at capturing the stories of adults. So we wanted to understand. It's a fascinating report. You can find it at findingjesus.co.uk. It's also on the EA site. findingjesus.co.uk takes you to the EEO site. And I'm not going to be able to share everything that is covered today, but what I do want to share are some of the insights that we garnered from the report and why they should be a helpful source of encouragement for you guys as you're seeking to bless and prosper the city of Oxford. And then I want to pose the question that I hinted at earlier, which is, what does it look like for organisations like mine at Ocker to help support, train and encourage you in your faith-sharing activities? How can we better come alongside you guys as you seek to bless those around you and introduce them to Jesus? So let's dive in. Okay. What prompted the start of somebody's journey? They're over 18, life's cracking on, they have no relationship with Jesus at all. What kicked off their journey? So there's multiple choice, lots of answers, but the top 3 answers was help me. They needed help with something in their life. Number 2 was I want that. They saw something in the Christian life of those around them. And number 3, what was that? There was some kind of spiritual encounter that they couldn't explain. So these were the top 3 answers that we got. Let's dig in. Okay, so help wanted. 37% of people who came to faith in adulthood of our respondents said, I needed help with life. So it comes as no surprise that the church you were just mentioning, Andy, who had engaged in one of the most deprived areas of Bristol, sought to seek to help the community with life, and saw a massive increase in people coming to faith. We should not be surprised that when we bless and encourage people and offer them help and support, that they are intrigued as to why that is happening. Social action and faith sharing go absolutely hand in hand. 34% of people were looking for meaning. It's worth noting that this research happened of people's faith journeys that would have started around COVID and come up to 2025. That's the time frame that we're looking in. It is absolutely fascinating to me when I look at some of the social questions that are being asked around meaning and purpose, just how meaningless, hopeless and purposeless people are feeling at the moment. The church has something unique to offer people who are asking questions about meaning and purpose of life. The research also talks about what aspects of the gospel were most attractive to people, and the gospel giving me meaning and purpose is right up there, especially for the under 25s and especially for those from low income. And then finally, 32%, a difficult or painful experience. In other words, when life is not going as it should, God's address is found at the end of people's ropes. The church is an amazing community to pick people up when they're struggling. Genuinely, the amount of times that my life has hit the fan and I've just gone, how do people cope without the church? I just don't get it. The church is amazing. And the fact is that we do exist for people outside of our own community. So actually, how do people cope without the church? They do not need to. And this is what you guys represent, and it is absolutely essential in encouraging people to start exploring faith. The church is brilliant at helping people, and we are seeing clearly the fruit of that when people start to explore faith. Number 2, I love this. Christian witness. Talking Jesus is another piece of research that the Evangelical Alliance helped produce. When people are asked about what they think about the church, they come up with really rubbish words. They come up with dead, judgmental, antiquated, dying, redundant, stuck in the past, all of that sort of stuff. When they are asked to describe the Christians that they know in their life, we are described as funny, kind, generous, encouraging. Love that we're funny. Yeah, we are. Thanks. Christian witness is an incredibly powerful tool when it comes to helping people on their journey. 29% of people who started their faith journey did it because a Christian friend spoke to them about their faith. What was also really interesting is that this was just a normal Christian. It was almost always not the pastor or the church leader or somebody in authority. It is just everyday people talking about what Jesus has done. It's so, so important. 29% of people said that they saw the impact that Christianity was having on somebody they know. Again, good old, the best apologetic verse, I say it 70,000 times a week. Always be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. Do it with gentleness, respect. In other words, we're meant to be living lives that inspire curiosity and questioning. And the fact is, we are. Why aren't we anxious? Why aren't we meaningless? Why aren't we hopeless? We are weird in our communities. And our friends, our neighbours, our colleagues, those around us, those who come into your services, into your projects, they're recognising that and they're seeing the impact of that. And then 26% of people, it is the actions of a Christian. Somebody helped me. I was sat next to a guy in church a couple of weeks ago, and he's stuck in temporary accommodation in Waterloo, and he's really struggling to get a flat. He's really struggling to get out of a hotel. So I've lived in it for 3 years, and I just don't know what to do. And I was like, oh. So in the sermon, I had to apologise to the preacher. I was on my phone messaging my mate. And I was messaging my friend who works in housing, and I said, do you have any advice? He sent me through the contact details of a number of campaigning and law firms. And so by the end of the sermon, I was able to give this guy contact details to help encourage him. And he just couldn't understand how a 5-minute conversation with a complete stranger had resulted in more help than he'd received from his housing officer in 6 months. Because we just care. We seek the peace and the prosperity of those around us. We want to bless because we are blessed. And it makes a massive difference. And then finally, well, not finally, because it's the top 3, there are loads of other options. 28% of people started their faith journey because they had a spiritual encounter or experience that they couldn't explain. One of the women in my church, she's from Iran, she had a dream of Jesus. The amount of YouTube and Instagram reels on my feed at the moment, which is just somebody sat in their car crying because they woke up that morning and they just felt like they had to go to church. And they went to church and they were just overwhelmed. There's been answered prayer, there's been healing, there's been dreams, there's been visions, there's been so many different things. God is on the move. The big question we then have is, do we know what to do with that person when they're walking through our doors? Do we know how to help hold their hand, explain what's happened, talk them through that experience? Are we ready for the people who've had dreams, visions, answered prayers, miraculous healings, to be coming in saying, I don't know what's happened to me, I think it's got something to do with a guy called Jesus, can you explain? So us being ready and aware that God is doing something, and we're invited to be a part of it. So, big question to you guys, in your churches, in your projects, in your everyday life, how are you doing at any of these? What are you up to? What is your open door to people who are starting a faith journey? Are you there for those who are saying, please help me? Are you there living a life that will be attractive and curiosity-raising to say, I want that? And are you ready to help journey alongside somebody who's had an experience that their world doesn't know how to make sense of? How are you doing with those ideas? One thing that did come out, so if somebody has started their journey into faith, or at least exploring who Jesus is, the Bible was the standout, most important thing that helped people on that journey. 47% said it helped them while they explored. 27% said, I was reading the Bible on my own and I gave my life to Jesus. And most cited it as the most, as there should be important. Most cited it as the most important thing they've done since coming to faith. The Bible is so deeply, oh, I've gone again. It's a very sensitive switch. Hold it that way. For me, it's really fascinating that prayer and spiritual experience and the Bible are right up there for people coming to faith. There's hardly any water between the two. We've got to love the Word. We've got to get in it. We've got to use it. We've got to share it. We've got to talk about it. There's so many tools and resources out there. We've got to love the Word. And we've also just got to expect God to be doing stuff. He is moving and he's inviting us to join in. So the Bible is a deeply, deeply significant part of people's faith journeys. So when it comes to supporting somebody exploring faith, we ask them what helped them. What did the Christians around them do that was really impactful and important? Time, space, and patience was the top answer. In our world, nobody has time. Nobody has time. And yet Christians are giving time and attention to people who are complete strangers. They have no relationship with them. They have not met them. But they are absolutely jaw-dropped the fact that somebody would give me their time. Then they gave space. They weren't pushy, they weren't judgmental, they just sat with me as I asked questions and explored, and they were really patient with me. They let me move at my time. It's what we heard over and over again. Answering questions. So as you're journeying with somebody who's exploring faith, there's always questions that emerge. Again, the person doing the answering was often not the church leader, it's just average, everyday Christians. So what was really encouraging to us in the research was that there was an absolute acceptance and, in fact, a joy that the person that they asked their questions to didn't always have the answer. There was no expectation that the person, the Christian that was doing that journey with them, had to have ready-made answers, but instead they journeyed with them to discover the answers together. They were allowed to ask stupid questions. They were allowed not to know. It was really important. Role modelling. Again, there's that journeying alongside the Emmaus Road of just what does it look like to do life and to share life. Offering support whenever needed. So it's not just a one-hit wonder. It's not just the one time to the food bank, but it's checking in. It's making sure they're doing okay. It's that regular contact. And then the single most important thing for people coming to faith was going to church. Don't be afraid to invite people if they actually want to come. So be encouraged. I'd love you to have a little think about how do you do in these areas? What does this look like for you? And where are the areas that you might want to lean into? As I said at the beginning, what I've found so encouraging about the Finding Jesus research is that in so many of these stories, the Christians around them were indeed preaching the gospel at all times. And on occasion, it was necessary for them to use words. I suppose my question to you guys is, when is it necessary? So much of the church's social action, compassion and mercy ministries are all about putting our faith and the gospel into action. But sometimes we can be a little hesitant about how and when to use our words. But the one thing that Finding Jesus research told us is that those who have come to faith were so deeply grateful that words were used, that the gospel was shared, that somebody was prayed for, that the Bible was opened, that they were encouraged. Faith sharing and social action do not need to be separate activities that the church does. They absolutely come together in preaching and sharing the gospel. So when is it necessary? And in other words, how can Oka help? How can ministries like mine help you with words, with ideas, with answers, with training and with support to encourage you for those moments when words are necessary? What are the words that are helpful in that moment? And I'd love to talk to you in the break. So remember, be encouraged. God is on the move. He is absolutely doing something, whether YouGov messes up the data or not. God is doing something. Be encouraged. Give people time. So many of our stories that we hear from the front are about somebody chatting to somebody on a plane, and by the time they get off the plane, they've given their life to Jesus and they're getting baptised in the showers at the airport. That's not our experience on the everyday. So just give people time, be patient in the journey with them. Invest in people helping to understand the Bible. Support new believers with the potential relational cost of conversion. In adulthood, people have their own communities. They have established family ties, especially if you're working with refugees or people coming in from other cultures. There is a huge relational cost to giving your life to Jesus, one that we don't often recognise if we've grown up in the church, and the church is our relational community. If you are seeing adults come to faith, know that that is a big, big ask, and be ready to be the community that they need. Recognise the value of the people in churches. It is often not the church leader who is the most significant Christian witness in people coming to faith. It is often just ordinary people in the pews. I want to leave you with this. It's a paraphrase of Matthew 28, and it is an invitation to us all to live our lives, to live out and share the good news. So as you go and live your lives, help everyone you encounter to become imitators of Jesus. Immerse them into a community built upon the characteristics of and a relationship between God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Enable them to put into practice Jesus' instructions for life, to love God with all you do, say, think, feel, and will, and to love all others as you are loved. Thank you so much. I would love to chat to you in the break. I can see that Steve is desperate to get to the coffee. Shameless plug moment. Reboot is our youth engagement. I would love to chat to any of you who's engaged with youth. And I'm also stealing the opportunity to talk to people based at Oxford. We have a job going. If any of you have any connections to job pages on your churches, or if you know anyone in the Oxford area that is commsy, social media-y, bit designy, bit creative, we are hiring a communications coordinator. The job went up yesterday, and we are really excited to appoint. So please do share that piece of news amongst your networks. I'm going to stop talking and come back.